few years ago, my family went on this camping trip, and it wasn't just like my husband and I and the kids. This was extended family. It was kind of a family reunion we had. So we had several campers lined up, and the kids were young, but we were having a great time, and we were sitting around telling stories. And at one point, I went and laid down my youngest son, who was 3 at the time, and I put him in our camper. And I also put my older son. He was being a little crabby, so I thought, you probably need a nap too. Mama needs a nap, but Mama wasn't getting a nap. Anyways, so I laid them both down, and then I went back just a few campers down. We were all right in the same area, but we were just sitting out in lawn chairs while some of the kids were sleeping and just talking and eating and, all those fun camping things. And after a little time went by, I remember going back to the camper to check on the boys. And I went in to where my youngest son was sleeping, and he wasn't there. And I moved some blankets around, and I looked, and I'm like, he's not here. And I went over, because the camper was a little bit longer, so one boy was way at one end and one was at the other. And so I went down and got my older son up, and I'm like, have you seen Maddon? That's my younger son. And he said no. And I'm like, well, I can't find him. He's not where he's supposed to be. So I went back to that end of the camper, and I picked up all the blankets and the pillows again and looked underneath them, and I was calling for him. And then I started opening the cabinets because he was small. So I started looking through the cabinets, and he wasn't in there, and I was calling, and by this time, I'm starting to panic. So I go out to the rest of the family who was hanging out, and I'm just getting emotional, and I start telling everyone that I can't find Maddon. And so they went with me back to the camper. We couldn't find him. Some people hopped on their bikes and started riding around. We were all calling and calling and calling. And I just remember this panic, and I start thinking about what if we never find him. And we were backed up, so there was a lake on one side, and there was trees, a treed area on the other side. And I didn't know it at the time, which I'm glad I didn't, because I probably would have freaked out even more, that my sister-in-law had rode her bike down to the water, I'm sure with that heavy, heavy feeling, because you just don't know. And I went back into the trees, and I was just screaming for him. And I was just so emotional, and I was so scared. And after a few minutes, I remember thinking, I'm like, okay, this can't be happening. Let's take it back. Let's go back to, where this all started. So I went back into the camper, and I'm pulling the blankets again. I'd already moved them 3 times. And I looked under the bed, and I pulled the one blanket, and the tiniest little blonde tuft of hair was sticking up in the very corner in between where the bed was and where the wall was. And as soon as I saw it, I knew, but it took a minute for it to sink in, and I just screamed his name, and his little head popped up, and the emotions that just happened at that moment were, just really indescribable. And I told my older son to run out and just to tell everybody, we found him, we found him, we found him. And I scooped him up in my arms, and I remember saying to him, baby, why did you hide from me? What were you doing? And he said he was so afraid because he thought I was going to be upset with him because he didn't fall asleep, because he didn't take his nap. And I wasn't mad at all. I was just so thankful that he was found.